I'm gonna be 100% honest with y'all, all right? I love my husband. Like, I love that man to death. I love our relationship. I love what we have built together. I love being his wife. But if anything were to ever happen where we weren't together anymore, I would definitely not do this marriage shit again. I don't think people really understand the effort that goes into having a successful marriage. This shit is not easy. Do not believe that fairy tale shit that you see on TV. Just because you love each other does not mean your marriage is going to work. Love is not enough. It takes patience, understanding. It takes compassion. It takes consideration. It takes forgiveness. It takes selflessness. For the rest of my life, every decision I make, I have to think about how it's going to affect my husband.
Just had the biggest heart. And for him to just take her away from us is just, just sad.
Mom, she was a very caring person. She loved everybody.
Sanaya holds on to the countless memories spent with her mom. They were supposed to see Barbie together on Saturday and spent many summer days at Metro Beach Pool.
All of my siblings was inside of the pool, and we all splashed at her to get in, and so she got in with us.
Thank you to everyone watching, and a special thank you to our subscribers. Your support means everything. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so. She had fought for this moment. Fought through years of struggle, through nights filled with fear, through the unbearable weight of a love that had turned into something unrecognizable. 7 children depended on her. 7 little hearts looked up to her, counted on her to protect them, to survive. And this was supposed to be the beginning of that survival, the day she finally broke free. The morning air was heavy as she stepped outside her home. Every step forward was a step toward a new life. A future she had barely begun to imagine. But before she could reach it, before she could even take another breath, the past came rushing back to meet her. A car, a shadow moving too fast. A man she once trusted, now with nothing but rage in his eyes. She ran, heart pounding, lungs burning, desperation taking over every instinct. But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough, because he had already made up his mind. Gunshots shattered the quiet morning, one after another. Each one an answer to a question she never got to ask. Each one a final, merciless punctuation to a story she had been fighting to rewrite. By the time the police arrived, the horror was still unfolding. And there, standing over her lifeless body, was the man who once vowed to love and protect her. Andricka Sims-McIntosh never made it to that courtroom. She never got to speak her truth, but her story. Who was Andricka Sims-McIntosh? More than just a name in a tragic headline, more than just another statistic in a growing crisis. She was a woman who lived, who loved, who fought for the life she deserved. She was a mother first, a protector always. 7 children depended on her strength, a strength she carried like armor through every challenge life threw her way. Her days started before the sun rose, balancing the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, pushing forward not just for herself, but for the little lives who called her mom. She had worn the uniform of a sheriff's deputy, stood on the front lines of law enforcement, carried the badge with pride. Later, she took on another role, working for the Transportation Security Administration, ensuring the safety of countless strangers while quietly fighting for her own. To those who knew her, Andricka was a force. Hard-working, determined, and fiercely protective of the ones she loved. Her family spoke of a woman who never backed down, who believed in justice, in doing what was right, even when it came at a cost. Friends described her as the kind of person who would give you her last dollar, who could find laughter in the hardest moments, who carried her burdens without letting them break her. But behind the long hours, the exhaustion, the unwavering resilience, there was another battle. One that no uniform, no training, no preparation could ever truly shield her from. A battle that had been building behind closed doors, tightening its grip around her life. Andricka was ready to escape it. She had made her decision. The divorce hearing was set. This was supposed to be the start of something new. She never got that chance. At first, it wasn't obvious. The fractures in the marriage were not the kind that showed in photographs or holiday gatherings. Smiles still formed for the sake of the children. Conversations still played out in public, like everything was fine. But behind closed doors, the weight of their unraveling relationship pressed down like a slow, suffocating force. Andricka had once believed in the vows they exchanged, believed that love, even when tested, could endure. But love should never have to survive fear, and fear had become a permanent fixture in her home. The arguments grew sharper, the tension heavier, the air between them thick with unspoken threats. What began as words laced with anger soon turned into something far more dangerous. Our family started noticing the change, the way her voice would waver when she spoke about him, the exhaustion in her eyes, not just from the long hours she worked, but from the battles she fought when she came home, the way she started watching over her shoulder as if expecting something, or someone, to be there. Then the threats started. Andricka's sister, Kanisha Williams, remembers them well, the phone calls late into the night. Breon's voice on the other end, seething with rage, demanding to speak to Andricka. His words were not empty, not casual. They carried intent, a promise of what was to come if she refused to listen, if she dared to leave. That night, the phone rang over and over again. He was relentless. And when Andricka refused to pick up, he called Kanisha instead. The message was clear. If Andricka wouldn't answer, she would suffer the consequences. He would make sure of it. Andricka had heard these threats before. She knew what he was capable of, and she had done everything in her power to protect herself and her children. She had made the decision. She was leaving. The divorce hearing was set. The legal steps were in motion. But walking away from a man like Breon McIntosh was never going to be that simple. In the days leading up to August 4th, the tension reached a breaking point. The fear she had carried, the warnings she had shared with those closest to her. It was all leading to something. She felt it. And yet she pressed forward, determined to take back her life. But what Andricka didn't know, what no one could have truly prepared her for, was just how far Breon was willing to go to ensure that she never got the chance. August 4, 2023. A morning like any other. The city of Detroit stirred awake. The hum of traffic filling the air. The weight of summer heat pressing down on the pavement. But for Andricka Sims-McIntosh, this morning was different. This was supposed to be the start of something new. A future untangled from the past that had threatened to consume her. The divorce hearing was hours away, a final step in a long, exhausting battle. She had fought to get here, endured the threats, the fear, the sleepless nights, wondering if she'd make it through. But today she was choosing herself. She stepped outside just after 7:45 am, the familiar weight of her routine settling in. The house behind her, the world ahead. There was no hesitation in her steps, no pause before she locked the door and walked toward her car. She was ready. But as she moved forward, something else moved closer. A car. His car. It wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't supposed to be here. But he was. Andricka barely had time to register what was happening before the door swung open and Breon McIntosh stepped out. Time slowed. For one breath, one impossible second, the world was silent. Gunfire. Andricka ran. Instinct took over. She turned from the man she once trusted, from the nightmare that had followed her for months, from the sound of her own death chasing her down the pavement. Footsteps pounded behind her, the ground shaking beneath her desperation. She pushed forward, breath sharp, heartbeat slamming against her ribs. She didn't look back. She didn't have to. She knew. He was right there. Another shot. The crack of it split the air, tearing through the morning, sending birds scattering from the telephone wires. She stumbled, a cry caught in her throat, the weight of pain slowing her down. But she kept running. She had to. But Breon wasn't stopping. Another shot. And another. By the time she collapsed, 6 shell casings lay scattered across the pavement, cold, lifeless reminders of the moments that stole her future. When the police arrived, Breon was still standing there, gun in hand. No attempt to run, no effort to hide what he had done. The decision had already been made long before this morning. Andricka never made it to the courtroom. She never got to speak her truth, never got to sign the final papers that would have freed her. Because Breon had made sure of it. The street was silent, the kind of silence that follows something irreversible, something that can't be undone. Andricka lay motionless on the pavement, her fight, her future, stolen in a matter of seconds. The city moved on around her, unaware of the life that had just been ripped away. But standing over her, weapon still in hand, was the man who had taken it all. Breon McIntosh didn't run. He didn't hide. When the first squad car pulled up, sirens cutting through the stillness, officers stepped out with weapons drawn, their voices sharp, commanding, "Drop the gun." For a moment, he didn't move, the metal of the weapon still warm in his grasp, the weight of what he had done settling in, or maybe it had settled long before he even pulled the trigger. Put it down, now. Slowly, almost too calmly, Breon's fingers loosened. The gun clattered against the pavement, landing near the shell casings that marked the final seconds of Andricka's life. His hands lifted, empty now but stained with a crime no amount of time would erase. The officers moved in fast. He didn't resist as they forced his arms behind his back, the steel of the handcuffs locking into place. He barely blinked as they patted him down, as they searched him for weapons, as they read him his rights. Because what more was there to say? The weight of the moment hung heavy in the air as he was led to the back of the police cruiser, his reflection in the window staring back at him, cold, empty, unbothered. The same man who had once vowed to love and protect her was now charged with her murder. Premeditated first-degree murder. A charge that left no room for doubt, no question of rage or impulse. This was a decision, a calculated act that ended in 6 shots and a woman who would never go home to her children again. By the time the news broke, the headlines told the story in fragments, just enough for the world to gasp, to shake their heads, to move on. Detroit man charged in fatal shooting of wife before divorce hearing. A headline, a statistic. Another case in the long, brutal history of domestic violence homicides. But for the 7 children left behind, for the family forced to bury their daughter, sister, mother, this wasn't just another story. It was a nightmare that had only just begun. And on August 14, 2023, the legal system would take its first steps in deciding what came next. 7 children. 7 lives forever changed. They woke up that morning expecting to see their mother again, to hear her voice, to feel the warmth of her presence. But instead, they were met with silence, the kind that stretches on, suffocating, unbearable. There was no explanation that could make sense of it, no words that could soften the truth. Their mother was gone, taken in an act so cruel, so deliberate that it defied all reason. Andricka wasn't just their mother, she was their protector, their provider, the one who made sure they were safe, who carried the weight of their world on her shoulders. And now, she wasn't coming back. How do you explain something like that to a child? How do you tell them that the person who was supposed to love them the most, their own father, was the reason their mother would never walk through that door again? One of Andricka's children had already faced unimaginable hardship. Her special needs nephew, the boy she had raised and cared for as her own, was now without the only steady presence in his life, the person who understood him, the person who fought for him. Andricka's sister, Kanisha, was left to pick up the pieces, but how do you fill the void of a mother who was stolen from her children? How do you comfort them when you yourself are drowning in grief? But it wasn't just the family that felt the impact. The community, those who had known Andricka, those who had worked beside her, those who had witnessed her strength, were left in shock. The case sent a chilling message, a reminder of the darkness that exists behind closed doors. A reminder that domestic violence doesn't discriminate. She had done everything right. She had left. She had sought legal protection. She had taken steps to reclaim her future. And yet, it wasn't enough. The news spread fast. The headlines were everywhere. Another woman murdered by an abusive partner, another name added to the growing list. Andricka's family refused to let her story be reduced to just another statistic. They created a GoFundMe not just for funeral expenses, but for the children left behind. A desperate effort to soften the devastating blow, to make sure that in the absence of their mother, they still had support. But money couldn't bring back what was lost. It couldn't erase the trauma, the nightmares, the endless ache of an absence that would never feel real. What it could do, what Andricka's story could do, was spark a conversation, a call for awareness, for action. Because Andricka should have been safe. She should have walked out of that divorce hearing free, not as another woman whose voice was silenced by the hands of the man who once claimed to love her. Her name would not be forgotten. But the question remained, how many more? How many warnings does it take before the system steps in? How many times must a woman cry out for help before someone listens? How many lives have to be lost before something changes? Andricka did everything she was supposed to do. She left. She sought protection. She went through the legal process. She followed every step that survivors of domestic abuse are told will keep them safe. But she still ended up dead. Her murder wasn't random. It wasn't without warning. It was preventable. She wasn't the first woman to be murdered by a man she once loved, and she won't be the last. In Wayne County alone, domestic violence homicides are on the rise. Prosecutor Kim Worthy has seen it too many times. The restraining orders, the court hearings, the desperate pleas for safety, all leading up to the same tragic outcome. Over and over again, the same pattern. Women come forward. They report the abuse. They seek help. But when the system meant to protect them falls short, when the very laws designed to keep them safe turn into nothing more than paperwork, they are left to fend for themselves. Restraining orders can't stop bullets. Court dates can't undo years of control and terror. By the time the legal system acknowledges the threat, it's often too late. Andricka's death is proof of that. She should have been standing in a courtroom that morning, facing the next chapter of her life. Instead, her body was lying in the street. Her children were left without a mother, and another statistic was added to the growing list. How many more? How many more will be failed before something changes?